So, would you mind telling me about yourself and what you do for a living? Or what is your occupation, rather?
Yeah, so I'm an associate professor in the psychology department. I'm also director of undergraduate studies for the neuroscience major, and I advise about 100 neuroscience and psychology majors.
What got you into that field of psychology?
When I was in sixth grade, I read a Psychology Today magazine and thought that it would be cool that you could do experiments on people. It was about 25-ish or more years later that I actually pursued that path, but it was just reading a magazine and study hall in sixth grade that made me think that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. What would you say your typical day or week looks like?
Well, I'm a special title series, which is a little bit different than you find at a lot of large universities. So I don't really have a research track or a research lab. I'm a special title series rather than a research title series. So I'm responsible for teaching 3 courses each semester. My day usually begins with answering 20 to 30 emails from students because I'm also in that director of undergraduate studies role and an advisor. And then I prep my course lectures for the day, write exams. I'm on several university and college level committees, so there's usually extra committee work to do. But for the most part, I try and focus on answering students' emails and questions, both regarding class, maybe their future, maybe their scheduling, and then prepping for coursework.
Yeah. You kind of went over it a little bit there, but do you think there's any like notable work that you've done in your field that's worth mentioning?
Yeah, since I'm not research, I think the biggest impact I have on the field of psychology is by preparing students to be future psychologists. And actually, I think I have an impact, or I hope I have an impact on my students' lives to make them better citizens, regardless of the field that they end up going into. So I try and design my courses to teach students not just about psychology, but about themselves, about how the world interacts, and try and give them a different perspective than they started with at the beginning of my courses.
Yeah. What do you think the field of psychology offers in comparison to other fields of study?
I think the field of psychology touches on every facet of what it is to be a human being, whether it's mental health, motivation to behave, understanding other people's behaviors, or understanding your own biology and how it impacts your thoughts and your behaviors. So I think psychology is unique in that it touches every facet of what it is to be a human being.
Yeah. Um, so obviously, you're unlike some of the other interviews that were conducted, you are not a counseling psychologist. What would you say to counseling psychologists who aren't quite sure about their track? Where would you recommend them to go next?
Well, if you're not sure where you want to be in the field of psychology, I think talking to people in different roles is the best opportunity that you have to find your fit. So just getting out there, getting to know people. UK has several different avenues that you can use to approach that, from talking to your professors at school to getting on Handshake and getting to know people across the United States that used to be UK graduates or are UK graduates and doing different facets of psychology, or maybe even outside of psychology. So I think just really getting out there and trying to educate yourself about all the possibilities.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you mostly work in neuroscience courses. What would you say is the most interesting thing about working within the field of neuroscience?
I don't know that I could put it down to one thing. So my field of neuroscience is behavioral neuroscience, understanding how the brain impacts behaviors, whether they're innate behaviors, acquired behaviors through learning, specialization, and addiction. And I guess addiction research is probably my favorite thing about neuroscience, although I think maybe if you come down to it, I enjoy the limbic system and how it changes a person's behavior, and both from normal behavior to abnormal behavior.